a church of 50, I want to be 100. If you're a pastor in a church of 150 and you can't get larger than 200, find the pastor who once had a church under 200 and now has a church over 200 and go to them and say, could you mentor me and teach me how to grow this church above 200? Now here's the key. You have to ask them. They don't come looking for you. You have to go to them and say, could I buy you breakfast once a month and ask you questions of what it took to grow the church larger than 200? You know what I found? Most pastors would say, sure, I'll make the time. Let's get together. And then you come in and you start asking them questions. And you let them mentor you on what it takes to get to the next level. If you're in a church of 1,000 and you want to grow larger, find another pastor somewhere who has taken a church from 800, 1,000 up to 3,000 and go to them and say, could I buy you breakfast once a month? And just ask you questions about what it took to grow from 1,000 to 3,000. I found if you go to them and you ask them, they'll do it. But if you expect them to come to you and ask you, you're going to be waiting a long time because they're busy people and they won't do it. But you've got to have the courage to go ask them and they'll do it. So you need one person just a little bit above you. So if you're in a church of 200 and you want to get larger, don't go ask somebody in a church of 6,000 how to do it, okay? Don't do that. They're too far up there. Ask the person who's in a church of 600 how they did it. At each level up, you find a new mentor who can help you go to the next level. Just one person. Okay? Then you need to have people underneath you that you can train to be leaders and that you can mentor to do ministry. Now, I would suggest that you go looking for them. In your church, be thinking who in your church has potential to be an elder? Who in your church has the potential to be a teacher? Who in your church has the potential to be a small group leader? You go to them and you say to them, you know, I see potential in you. I see possibilities. I've got an idea. How about if we meet for breakfast every Thursday morning at 6 a.m.? And let's just talk about ministry. Let's just pray together. You don't have to have a curriculum. You just meet with them and you begin to share your life with them and share ministry with them and get them involved in ministry. And I would suggest that you try and get at least 6 people. At least 6. Okay, 5. 5's okay, all right? 5's all right. Don't go for too many. You remember Jesus only had 12, and he lost one of them. So he only had 11, really. So don't get too big. But pick some people that you think have potential and meet with them and just begin to pray and work with them and do ministry. If you go to the hospital, call one of them and ask them to go with you. You know, if you're leading a small group, ask one of them to help you lead the small group and then let them do it once in a while. And then eventually just give it to them and walk away and let them have the small group. You know, you begin to mentor other people. And then you need some mentors who are like you. Mentors who are on the same level. Are there some other pastors in churches basically the same size as yours that you could go to them and you could say, could we meet once a month? You know, you're in a church of 50. I'm in a church of 50. Let's ask this other pastor over here in a church of 50. Let's get together for lunch once a month and let's just talk about, you know, our churches and the similar struggles that we have and how we might be able to support one another and pray for one another. Or if you're in a church of 700, maybe you find some other churches that pastors are about the same size of church as you, and you get together for lunch. So what you've got is you've got one person who's a little bit further down the road than you, helping you move to the next level. You've got 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 people underneath you that you're working with in a group to mentor them to be leaders in your church. And then you've got some other people alongside of you who are pastors who are very similar to you that you can pray with and you can cry with and you can share with in ministry. that helps a lot in the growth of your church. Well, what about if you want to get over 400? Let me do a couple more here. All right. What if you want to get your church over 400? What are typical things you need to do? You're going to have to use the back of some of your pages, I know. By the way, there's a good book that has all this in it. It's called Taking Your Church to the Next Level. I'm sorry we don't have any hard copies here, but you can order it, or you can get it off of ebooks or Kindle or something like that. But there's a lot more detail. I'm just giving you some very quick overviews here of this. But to get over 400, what you have to do, Pastor, is you have to shift your role away from doing pastoral care all the time, and you got to shift more to training leaders in the church. Again, the basic rule is for every leader you have in the church, you have 10 people. You know where that comes from? It comes from Moses and Jethro in Exodus. Remember, Moses was trying to do everything, and Jethro comes along and he says, Moses, what you're doing is not good. He says, you're going to wear yourself out and you're going to wear the people out, Moses. Let me give you some advice. Moses, choose leaders of 10 and leaders of 50 and leaders of hundreds and leaders of thousands. Leaders of 10. See, in your church right now, you probably have, if you've got a church of 100, you've probably got 10 good leaders in your church. 10 good leaders who are capable of leading 10 people each. You probably have 1 or 2 good leaders in your church who are capable of leading 50 people. And you probably got 1 leader who's good at leading 100, and that's probably you. But you probably got 2 other people who are good at leading 50 each. So if we can train 5 more leaders this year, that's going to give our church the capacity to grow 50 people. If you want to grow 100 more people this year, then you got to train at least 10 leaders this year. 10 new leaders, not 10 old leaders who have been leaders before. 10 new leaders, people who haven't been given opportunities to lead. And that's where the mentoring comes in. You look for people with possibilities, people who aren't doing things, and then bring them together and begin to train them and to mentor them. You have to shift administration to pastoral and support staff. What this means is you've got to have some secretaries, or you've got to have an administrative pastor, someone that you begin to shift the administrative details to them so that you can focus on leadership development. You've got to shift pastoral care to other people in the church. This is one of the most difficult things for pastors to do, because most of us have been taught that it's our job to visit in the hospital. It's our job to be at the homes of people and hold their hands and pray with them. It's our job to provide the pastoral care. But our job as leaders is to lead the church. We're responsible for the pastoral care, but that doesn't mean we have to do it. What it means is we have to make sure that it gets done. And if you want your church to grow, one of the big changes you have to do is you got to shift away from you doing all the hospital visitation, home visitation, things like that, and you've got to begin to build teams of people in the church who will visit in the hospital, who will visit in the homes. You then take care of the emergency caregiving situations. Someone's in an accident, you know, they're riding their motorcycle down the street and they get hit by a jeepney or something and they're hurt bad. Yes, you go to the hospital. But somebody's in the hospital just to have an operation on their ankle, you may not go. But you know something? Somebody has to go. Somebody needs to go pray with that person, but it doesn't have to be you. So what happens is around 400, you start giving away the everyday pastoral care to people in the church, and then you take care of the emergencies in the church. That's a hard thing to do for many pastors. You need to add a third staff person, a third pastor, a third secretary in order to get above 400. Most of the time, you don't get above 400 without at least 3 staff people in the church. And usually at least 2 of them have to be pastors, maybe 3, and a secretary. You need to have multiple worship services. Multiple worship services. So you may move from 2 worship services to 3 worship services. Or you may have church in this facility and church in another facility. Now, it's the same church. It's just meeting in 2 different locations, is all it is. You have to build on your best ministries. When you get up to around 400, what you'll begin to notice is that some of your ministries are really good at reaching new people. Others of your ministries are not very good at reaching new people. So what you want to do is find out the new people who become a part of your church, which ministries are the ones that really touched their heart and brought them into the church. And the way you do this is you ask the new people. You have a new members class, or you have a get acquainted class for your church, and in that class, you say to people, I'd like to go around the room today, and I'd like to ask each of you, was there any particular ministry in our church that was important in getting you here or getting you to stay? And let them tell you. What I've discovered is that most of the time, only about 20% of the ministries your church offer are the ones that are bringing new people in the church. So find out which of those ministries are bringing new people in the church, and then put more energy into them. Give them more money. Give them more leaders. Invest in those ministries that are being effective for you. All right, breaking 800. By 800, you want to get over 800? You have got to, pastor, senior pastor, lead pastor, by 800, you have got to have given away the caregiving. In a church of 800, there is no way you as a pastor, or even with a staff of pastors, can care for everybody in the church. There's just too many people. And so you have to let other people be involved in the caregiving. But I've already mentioned this. So when the church is around 200, you've got to start giving the care ministry away to other people in the church. By the time you get to 800, you should have given it away. And the only caregiving that you provide is emergency care or care to your elders and your key leaders in the church. You as the lead pastor are probably going to have to continue to care for your main elders, their families, and the key leaders in the church. But the rest of the leadership has to care for the rest of the people in the church, because you just won't have the time to do it. You have to identify niches to reach new people. Now, niches just simply means the small ministry areas of the church where you need a new ministry. For instance, you may have, in a small church, you may have a family that has a special needs child. But you may only have one family with a special needs child. So in a small church, even though you love them and you care for them and you wish you could provide something for them and their family, you just can't do it because there's just one family. And you just can't build a ministry around one family. But you start getting up around 800, you could have 40 families in the church that had 40 special needs children. Okay, now you need a ministry for special needs children in your church. So you start, when you get up to around 800, you start looking, who has God brought to you? What are their needs? And you begin to see groups of people that have different particular needs. Okay, then you start these specialized ministries for them. As you start those specialized ministries, people in the community who have those same needs, they start hearing that that church has a ministry for special needs children. And all of a sudden you start attracting more families with special needs children. And you start winning more people to faith in Christ because you've got this unique ministry that other churches then can't offer to the community. You need to develop a team of multiple staff specialists. So when you get up to, typically when you first start hiring pastors, you'll hire a pastor and then an assistant pastor and an associate pastor. And, what do assistant pastors and associate pastors do anyway? Do you know what they do? I can tell you what they do. They do everything the senior pastor doesn't want to do. That's what they do, right? By the time you get to 800, you have to have specialists. So you have a pastor of evangelism. You have a pastor of assimilation of new people into the church. You have a pastor of administration. You have a pastor of care. You have a pastor of education. So by the time you get to 800, you don't just have an associate pastor and an assistant pastor, but you have specialists who specialize in unique parts of the ministry. You have to focus on leadership development. I've already said that. That starts when the church is smaller. But boy, by the time you get to be 800, you better be focusing on leadership development. Now, I'll tell you what most churches do when it comes to leaders. They simply pray, God, bring us leaders from other churches. Now, they're not quite that open about it, The Lord says to pray ye that the Lord of the harvest will send forth workers into the harvest. And the way most churches interpret that is that I'm going to pray that God will send some workers to us from other churches. What you need to do is build your own leaders. Don't pray for other churches to send you their leaders. Build your own leaders. I don't have time to unpack this, but I'm going to tell you the secret of leadership development. And that is that you require as much as you can. You require as much as you can every leader in your church to get an apprenticed leader. Every small group leader needs to get an apprenticed small group leader. Every teacher needs an apprenticed teacher. Every elder needs an apprentice elder. Every deacon needs an apprentice deacon. Now, here's the catch here. Your apprentice can't be somebody who's already doing something in the church. So I can't ask a person who's a small group leader to be an apprentice teacher because they're already a small group leader. What I have to do is go to people who are doing nothing in the church and ask them to be my apprentice. Now, the only place that changes is like with an elder. And we're looking for people who are Christians who are growing up and maturing and have the potential to be elders. Yes, you may look for an apprentice elder who's already a small group leader or a teacher because they're already showing the ability to have the maturity to be a leader. But in most ministries, what you want to do is you want your leaders that are already serving to find people who are not serving and ask them to come along and apprentice with them and learn to be a teacher, learn to be a small group leader. Now, when you do that, what happens is that you build a kind of a team of people that are being trained to move up and be leaders in the church. And so in baseball, it's called the farm system. Baseball teams have other teams underneath the major league teams that are learning to play the game, and then eventually they move up to the main team. And so we in the church need to build our farm teams, and that's our apprentice in the church. Well, you need to use your facilities multiple times or use various sites. To get to 800, you're either going to have to find a facility like this that allows you to expand. Right here we have about 400 people, and if you notice, the bottom floor is pretty full. So if there's 400 up above, this facility seats about 800. So if this church has 800, they've got to be in 2 services or 3 services if they want to grow. Or they're going to have other venues, other places where they have other services, other churches meeting in other facilities. All right. Well, I'm going to stop there. My day is done. Thank you so much for allowing me to come. God bless you all.
Then one more. There's a seminar entitled Conversational Evangelism this coming May 27, 28, and 29. Dr. David Geisler, author of the book Conversational Evangelism, and who's been doing this seminar all over Asia and Europe and the world, will be coming to IGSL for 3 days. If you're interested, tickets are now available at the Back to the Bible bookstore. So it's only 850 pesos if you register before April 30. We'd like to thank once again our co-sponsors for this seminar: Green Hills Christian Fellowship, FEBC 702 DZAS, Church Strengthening Ministries, and the Philippine Council of Evangelical Churches. Thank you very much. We'd also like to thank all the many volunteers who helped make this seminar possible. Our thanks to Raymond Chan for leading the worship. We appreciate the staff of GCF, especially Tess Angeles and Jing Padasas for their help. Thank you. We want to thank the team from IGSL who guided this event. Pastor Hale Balignasay, Pastor Neil Mamburam, Miriam Franco, and Dr. Steve Hobson.